you're doing well. It's Minky here, and for this video I'm going to read a story for you called The Water Lily and the Gold Spinners, while I make typing sounds on the keyboard and I alternate between soft-spoken voice and whispers. I hope you enjoy this. Let's start. When a wicked witch keeps her beautiful daughters locked away, who will save them? Once upon a time, in a large forest, there lived an old woman and 3 maidens. They were all 3 beautiful, but the youngest was the fairest. Their hut was quite hidden by trees, and none saw their beauty but the sun by day and the moon by night and the eyes of the stars. The old woman kept the girls hard at work, from morning till night, spinning gold flax into yarn, and when one staff was empty, another one was given them, so they had no rest. The thread had to be fine and even, and when done was locked up in a secret chamber by the old woman, who twice or thrice every summer went a journey. Before she went, she gave out work for each day of her absence, and always returned in the night, so that the girls never saw what she brought back with her. Neither would she tell them whence the gold flax came, not what it was used to be used for. Now, when the time came round for the old woman to set out on one of these journeys, she gave each maiden work for 6 days with the usual warning: "Children, don't let your eyes wander, and on no account speak to a man, for if you do, your thread will lose its brightness, and misfortunes of all kinds will follow." They laughed at this oft-repeated caution, saying to each other, "How can our gold thread lose its brightness, and have we any chance of speaking to a man?" On the 3rd day after the old woman's departure, a young prince, hunting in the forest, got separated from his companions and completely lost. Weary of seeking his way, he flung himself down under a tree, leaving his horse to browse at will, and fell asleep. The sun had set when he awoke, and began once more to try and find his way out of the forest. At last he perceived a narrow footpath, which he eagerly followed, and found that it led to a small hut. The maidens who were sitting at the door of their hut for coolness saw him approaching, and the 2 elder were much alarmed, for they remembered the old woman's warning. But the youngest said, "Never before have I seen anyone like him. Let me have one look." They entreated her to come in, but seeing that she would not, left her, and the prince, coming up, courteously greeted the maiden, and told her he had lost his way in the forest, and was both hungry and weary. She set food before him, and was so delighted with his conversation that she forgot the old woman's caution and lingered for hours. In the meantime, the prince's companions saw him far and wide, but no to no purpose, so they sent 2 messengers to tell the sad news to the king, who immediately ordered a regiment and one of infantry to go and look for him. After 3 days' search, they found the hut. The prince was still sitting by the door and had been so happy in the maiden's company that the time had seemed like a single hour. Before leaving, he promised to return and fetch her to his father's court, where he would make her his bride. When he had gone, she sat down to her wheel to make up for lost time, but was dismayed to find that her thread had lost all its brightness. Her heart beat fast, and she wept bitterly, for she remembered the old woman's warning, and knew not what misfortune might now befall her. The old woman returned in the night, and knew by the tarnished thread what had happened in her absence. She was furiously angry, and told the maiden that she had brought down misery both on herself and on the prince. The maiden could not rest for thinking of this. At last she could bear it no longer, and resolved to seek help from the prince. As a child, she had learned to understand the speech of birds, and this was now of great use to her, for seeing a raven pluming itself on a pine bough, she cried softly to it, "Dear bird, cleverest of all birds, as well as swift as on wing, wilt thou help me?" "How can I help you?" asked the raven. She answered, "Fly away until you come to a splendid town where stands a king's palace. Seek out the king's son and tell him that a great misfortune has befallen me." Then she told the raven how her thread had lost its brightness, how terribly angry the old woman was, and how she feared some great disaster. The raven promised faithfully to do her bidding, and spreading its wings, flew away. The maiden now went home and worked hard all day at winding up the yarn her elder sisters had spun, for the old woman would let her spin no longer. Toward evening, she heard the ravens cry from the pine tree, and eagerly hastened there to hear the answer. By great good fortune, the raven had found a wizard's son in the palace garden, who understood the speech of birds, and to him he had entrusted the message. When the prince heard it, he was very sorrowful, and took counsel with his friends how to free the maiden. Then he said to the wind wizard's son, "Beg the raven to fly quickly back to the maiden, and tell her to be ready on the 9th night, for then will I come and fetch her away." The wind wizard's son did this, and the raven flew so swiftly that it reached the hut the same evening. The maiden thanked the bird heartily and went home, telling no one what she had heard. As the 9th night drew near, she became very unhappy, for she feared lest some terrible mischance should arise and ruin all. On the night, she crept quietly out of the house and waited tremblingly at some little distance from the hut. Presently, she heard the muffled tramp of horses, and soon the armed troop appeared, led by the prince, who had prudently marked all the trees beforehand in order to know the way. When he saw the maiden, he sprang from his horse, lifted her into the saddle, and then, mounting behind, rode homeward. The moon shone so brightly that they had no difficulty in seeing the market trees. By and by, the coming of dawn loosed the tongue of all the birds, and had the prince only known what they were saying, or the maiden been listening, they might have been spared much sorrow, but they were thinking only of each other. And when they came out of the forest, the sun was high in the heavens. Next morning, when the youngest girl did not come to her work, the old woman asked where she was. The sisters pretending not to know.